Welcome back to part 3 of this wet room shower tray series, guys. Today I'm going to show you how to install mosaic tiles on a wet room floor with my tips and tricks along the way. If you've been following along, I've already installed the shower tray and done all the waterproofing. I'll link those videos in the description. So now it's time to bring this bathroom to life with these mosaic tiles. And mosaics are quite a beginner friendly tile to lay on a wet room floor, as you can just follow the tray's falls without having to cut the envelopes, and you only need basic tools. So let's jump into it. So as with any tiling, we start with the setting out first. 9 times out of 10, you really want your tiles to be centered around your drain, like you can see here. Now this all depends on the tile size and where your drain is, but if it's a visual part of your floor, I try to center the tiles around it. Mine here just about works out with full cubes, but if it didn't, I'd cut L shapes around it so it was still centered. Then I'd start measuring around the room to see how other things work out to the door and other walls, etc. The great thing with mosaics is they're generally so small they will always work out pretty well, and you have some room to manipulate them if need be. So after placing a few down here, I'm checking that I'm square with the door and the drain. I did install the tray square with the door, so it should all work out pretty good. Once you're happy with your setup, I'd recommend dry laying and doing some cutting first. So I'm just using my level to keep a square line, then I'm just putting down some sheets so I can do some cuts. My plan here is to tile the whole top half as I can just about reach it, and then do the bottom half. I do one last check to make sure I'm happy the tiles are square, and then just draw a line which I'll be working to later. A good tip for cutting mosaic if you have a manual tile cutter with a push down mechanism is to mark the cut on the mosaic sheet with a tape. I like to draw the line through 2 marks, then you can just line it up with your tile cutter, scribing and snapping off each individual cube. Then with a knife or scissors, cut the mesh across your cut. This saves time over alternatives of using an angle grinder or water cutter, and you'll stay dry and dust free. So I just repeat this method until I have dry cut the whole section. Once I remove my level, I continue my spread line and put a few marks where my first few sheets will be placed as a guide. Doing this dry laying first ensures when you come to fixing, you only need to worry about putting the mosaic sheets down, so less things to think about, and it becomes a very quick process. I then take up all the sheets and number the cuts so I know what order they go down in, and mark the wall corresponding to not get confused. Now the real art in laying mosaic is making sure the adhesive doesn't come through the joints. If it does, this will become a messy nightmare. Therefore I'd recommend using a trowel that is 6 to 8mm in depth. My tiles are 10mm, so I'm going to go with an 8mm trowel and just slightly lower the notches by holding it a bit flatter. This will ensure a good bond without the adhesive rising through the joints. The second important thing is to not mix or use sloppy adhesive. It needs to be more on the mid to stiff consistency, but still wet enough to bond the tile. If it's too wet of a mix, you'll end up in a complete mess. So I've mixed up some flexible adhesive and I'm going to spread this whole section. If you're new to this, I'd recommend only spreading in small patches, as you don't want the adhesive to start curing before the tiles go down. For me, I will be quick, but everyone works at different paces, so just bear that in mind. And I'm just spreading the adhesive, trying to keep all the ribs in the same direction. Once that's done, it's just a case of laying your first mosaic on your guideline and mark where it should go. To start with, I just place a few sheets down, not trying to disturb them too much. I then add some 2mm spacers between the sheets and anywhere that looks like it needs them. Mosaic sheets are not always perfect, so you may need to add some spacers to straighten them out. Next, to get them bonded and straight, take a grout float and pat them down. Only try and use this to move them, otherwise you'll start kinking them. Using a grout float will ensure they stay flat without disturbing them too much. So I just put my level down as a straight edge on my line, whack the sheets of mosaic with my float to that. I check that I am square with my door and my drain, then I'm good to carry on. Once that first bit is square, it's all pretty straightforward from here, just placing and patting, adding spacers between sheets and anywhere needed. This is the first time I've actually done a mosaic floor for a few years. I'm so used to large porcelain tiles and cutting envelope cuts for the drain falls that I really enjoyed this one, and I found it an absolute breeze, so I hope some of these tips will make it the same experience for you. Obviously a lot of the ease comes in the preparation, so just always make sure your surface is flat and clean before installing tiles. Once I've got that section done, I just draw another spread line and carry on working my way out of the room. You can see here I've hardly got any adhesive coming through the joints, and that is what we are after when laying mosaics. At the door, when I said about manipulating the tiles, the gap is slightly bigger than I'd like, so I just put a single strip in and slightly open the joint to decrease the size of the gap. As long as it's not too obvious, you'll never see it with so many joints on the floor. And when it was all done, this is how it looked. I grouted it with a matching flexible grey grout, and I think it came up pretty well. Along with the finished wall tiles, this all ties in nicely to create a custom wet room with some nice feature tiles. I hope you like that little series, guys, and it gives you some ideas and tips for your own wet rooms.